Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm here with Assistant Secretary, Acting Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Education and Culture, Youth Affairs and Sports, Mrs. Brenda Letsom-Tai. It's good to have you. Good to see you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, welcome to Spotlight. And Dr. Angel Smith, Director of Virgin Islands Studies Institute at A76 Community College. It's always good to see you, my brother.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yes. Territory Day seemed to be taking on increasing significance over the years. And I know for many, many years now we've had a really terrific celebration on Long Bay Beach, Beef Island. Every year, fishermen go out, people come up, the band play, we party on the beach. It's a lot of fun. Then you have the potters that go over to Swords Island. That was a tradition from years gone by. It continues, and people celebrate Territory Day. And I suspect that this year is going to be no less. And I'm actually expecting there's going to be a greater celebration in light of the fact that we are now more nationalistic.
Yes, I think so. We celebrated the Territory Day last year, as you know, and for the first time we brought out our territorial signs and symbols, the things that represent us. And to reiterate what they were, we had a territorial dress, the bird, music, food, the badge, the flag, the tree, the flower, the colors, and the song, all presented on Territory Day last year. It was a great event. The public were wonderful. They came out, they participated, and it gave the government of the Virgin Islands an opportunity to present to the public the signs and the symbols, the ideals that represent us as a people. And we were very happy to be able to do that last year.
In the Noah Lloyd Positive Action
Movement. In the Noah Lloyd Positive Action Movement
that's significant.
Very significant.
Yes.
This year, once again, the government of the Virgin Islands, through the Ministry of Education and Culture, we have planned a ceremony once again to celebrate Territory Day. And the focus this year is on the history of Territory Day and what it means to us as a people. We're focusing on why we have Territory Day. What is the significance of this day? We will be doing a presentation of what we call Songs of the Virgin Islands. We established a territorial song last year, but there are other songs that represent us, you know, our pride or national pride and describe who we are as Virgin Islanders. And two of those songs will be presented at this ceremony. They were written by Dr. Quincy Letsom and Mr. Dylan Penn. There will be cultural presentations. We have Fungi music, we have dance, and we have song. And we have the highlight of the event, which is a dramatization by local playwright Miss Janice Stout. And anyone who's ever seen or been to one of Miss Stout's plays knows they're phenomenal. Yeah. And she's going to give us a little history and a little story about ourselves at that ceremony.
And bring a handkerchief to dry your eyes from the tears of laughter.
From the tears of laughter.
You laugh and you cry.
Oh yeah, she has she is the pinnacle of that event, and we're looking forward to it. She very graciously agreed to an original play just for Territory Day, I might add. So this is something definitely, you haven't seen this anywhere, so you need to come out and see it here. And of course, as always, the Department of Culture is always involved with the youth, and we're going to have youth involvement in the ceremony as well. We're going to have a representation from the Elmer Stout High School and the Brigada Flax Educational Debate Teams. As we know, they recently put on a spectacular final,
yes,
where I think Elmer Stout won, but I understand it was absolutely phenomenal. The debate teams did an outstanding job.
Down to the wire.
Down to the wire. And they will be there as well. We have the Western Schools Mass Choir, which are the primary schools, and they're Leonore Delville Primary School, Ivan Dawson Primary School, and the Isabella Morris Primary School. They're going to come together and as a little mass choir and give us a presentation. We will have the Ebenezer Thomas Primary School give us a dance, and we have none other than the who I call the pinnacle of the primary Fungi, Alta Scatliff Fungi School band will be presenting music for us that day as well.
So you have a full program.
We have a full
so
program.
all of the events are going to be in the park?
The event will be on Monday, June 30th, and I want to make it very clear that July 1st is Territory Day, but as we celebrate holidays here in the Virgin Islands, they usually fall on a Monday. So this year we will be celebrating it on Monday, June 30th, 9 a.m. at the Noel Lloyd Positive Action Movement Park under the theme, Our Territory, Our Story.
Okay, and what is driving? What is the motivational force behind this new life that's being brought into the Territory Day? And I know we talk about nationalism, but where's the vision? What's the vision that we are going towards with Territory Day now?
I think I can safely answer this from the ministry's and the government's point of view. As you said earlier, this day has been used to celebrate Fisherman's Day, which is a great event, and the Salt Island descendants have reenacted their history on that day. But for many, many years, you ask people, what is Territory Day? And they would give you, it's Fisherman's Day or it's the Descendants' Day, but it is Territory Day. It was given to us for a reason, and it's a very significant reason in our political history. I'll let Dr. Smith talk more about the historical background of it, but I think that we need to realize that Territory Day is why we are who we are. We were a colony at one point. We were part of another federation colony, and then we got back our own status. We stand alone. And I'm not going to give too much away, but the fact that we are our own little territory is very significant in the larger world of the British Empire, to whom we sort of belong. But I'll let Dr. Smith.
Yeah. I was looking for some. I was looking for some more juicy stuff.
Like what? But it's territory. We don't know why it's Territory Day.
I was looking for some more juicy stuff coming out of the ministry. Because it seems like there's a push towards developing a sense of independent consciousness, a sort of a separation from the mother country.
From the mother country?
A stand alone. I don't want to say the word independence, but
well, I think before we get there, we have to understand.
Is it like it's like a step, a baby step here?
Well, perhaps you can call it a baby step, because
nothing is being said in the ministry.
Interesting as it is, until last year, we didn't have national signs and symbols. We had a few. So we didn't even have signs and symbols that identified us as a people. That's a huge step. Every nation has signs and symbols that they use.
Nation, that's a political term.
Every nation has signs and every country has signs and symbols that represent them as a people. And it was long in coming, but we got there. We've started. And I must say we're very pleased with the way it has been accepted. Every public event begins with the national anthem and the territorial song. So we were making strides in ownership of the signs and the symbols and the pride. I look at people when the territorial song is being sung, and I look at their faces, and they're taking ownership. There's pride, and there's nothing lovelier than when the territorial song is being sung and you have children around, because they sing the entire song. They know it all, and they sing it with pride.
Well, one of my concerns about singing, hearing and playing and standing for the territorial song is, that we stand up straight and rigid for our territorial song. Our territorial song got a beat. You know what I'm saying, Dr. Smith? It got soul.
That's soul.
Yeah, I don't never stand up. I can't stand up straight and at attention for our territorial song. I gotta be swaying, singing.
Well, you're encouraged to sing.
And I was concerned that we don't get trapped in that national anthem. The British national. That we have to celebrate
the way it's.
Yeah, we have to celebrate our territorial song like the way we celebrate the British national anthem.
Well, I must say that
we should have our own celebration.
We've had a lot of questions about what is the protocol for the song. So we're working on that. We've made a draft document that we're revising, so we can bring it to the public and let them know what is acceptable to do or not to do during the territorial.
Because I don't want to necessarily feel uncomfortable or make it seem like I'm disrespecting the national song. But our national song is a bomb. You know, I mean, it just is. You know, you want to move, you want to sway, you want to sing. You know, it's got good melody, got good lyrics. Is it ain't na 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 na. It ain't that.
No, it's not.
It's not that.
But as I said, that was a great step for us as a people, moving towards having pride.
Yes. And the gifts.
The gifts,
the
everything. I
mean, bringing all those things to our attention.
People have embraced that this represents us as Virgin Islanders.
Now, Dr. Smith, history, you like to talk about the past.
Yes.
You like to talk about the past. That's your thing, right?
I'm most comfortable talking about the past.
And I know very little about Territory Day. As a Virgin Islander, we hear about it. We enjoy the celebration naturally because it's
a holiday.
It's a holiday, but going to the beach is a cultural event. That's a thing that we grew up doing. Fishing is a thing we grew up doing. So that's real cultural to us. Music is our thing, and so we have a good time going to the beach on Beef Island and celebrating Territory Day. But as far as its historic and political and national pride significance, I don't know if we understand it and know what it is from that perspective.
But I think it's important that we try to find a simple way to bring out the concept of Territory Day. And it would be if we are celebrating every year, as it were, the birthday of our territory, of this great little nation, as we want to become. But as a starting point, if we look at the history, we would see that it's kind of difficult to hammer down some of the initial dates in some instances because of the change in nature in the Caribbean at the time, with ownership shifting from one nation to another. But it is agreed that about 1672, that is when the British firmly took over these islands, and they had them in their possession from that period. While the islands were settled shortly thereafter, there was never any formal structure in terms of a constitutional government. And that didn't come into being until 1773, when it was agreed that we would have a constitutional government with a council and House of Assembly. So we celebrate that in that sense. Now, we came through a long period in terms of that, because now in 1773 we were a colony. We had our own, as I said, our own council and assembly, a sort of a bicameral system of government, and that continued within these islands for a period of time. So the Virgin Islands was one of the many colonies in the British Empire at that time, in the Caribbean, in the then British Caribbean. We had a House of Assembly, where the House of Assembly in the Virgin Islands had the same sort of clout and power as the House of Assembly in Jamaica or in Barbados, passing their own laws. And that came through that whole period in terms of how the Virgin Islands evolved. And what I found interesting was that there were a few things that happened in the Virgin Islands as a part of this progression, where in 1831, for example, we had in the Virgin Islands the first free colored, becoming a member of the House of Assembly. Now, this is something that would not have happened anywhere else in the British Caribbean. Free coloreds were given a new status. They were treated as white people, because before that they were in a different categories to themselves, and they were now being treated as white people. And then in the Virgin Islands, they evolved to the point where one of them became a member of the House of Assembly. And that then we can see kind of start off a whole process within the Virgin Islands where you're saying that, you know, as locals, the indigenous Virgin Islanders now, we were gaining that sort of a political clout. In fact, the name of that man was George Hill. There are very few of that family, persons in that family name still remaining, but there are still a few of them. The Hills, they were at that point.
The chief immigration officer is one.
Exactly. And then there are a few up in Soldiers Hill. You have a few families still with the name. So it goes back. Those families go right back to that point. So you have George Hill becoming in at that point as a free colored, as a member of the House of Assembly in the Virgin Islands. As I said, something that would never happen anywhere else in the British Caribbean until long after emancipation.
Let me slow down. You're going kind of fast.
Yeah.
There. Now, you talk about this happening, this constitutional change or the constitutional development happening in the 1700s.
Yeah.
Yes.
But Emancipation Proclamation was in the 1800s.
1800, yes, 1834.
So, what was happening at that time? Was it that when you talk about a government and a constitution, were you talking about the slavers' descendants setting up that governance structure in the territory, or which would have been still slaves? Africans would have still been slaves during that time.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Well, at that time, we are talking about a plantation economy, and the planters were the ones who formed the whole initial constitutional government that was given to the planters. So it was a planter-led House of Assembly and also the planters on the council. They were the ones that were running the Virgin Islands. In fact, we had enslaved people at that time. So that's why it is significant that by 1831, you have now someone who's a free colored. That is someone whose father would have been a white planter and whose mother would have been a free black. So this person was referred to as a white colored. As a colored person, and he was coming.
The mother would be a free African.
His mother would have been free black.
So you mean it would have been given her freedom by the slave owner?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because there was a large population of free blacks in the Virgin Islands at that time. In some instances, you had free coloreds whose parents were in fact slaves, and their father was in fact the plantation owner. And that was a whole different category, because we had several planters in the Virgin Islands who their heirs were in fact their slaves, their children, but eventually they were all given their freedom. So, but what I'm saying is
hence the illegitimacy law.
Yes, which still remains intact.
Well, yes. we just did away with it a few weeks ago, right?
All right. So now you see now. So what I'm saying is that we're seeing a sort of a progression that is happening. By 1837, then you had two members in the House of Assembly who were free coloreds.
Okay.
There was A. O'Neill. I'm trying very hard to find out the full name, but most of the records just refer to him as A. O'Neill. And then the other one, and he represented Virgin Gorda, and the other one was Abraham Chalwell Hill Smith. He represented Jos Van Dyke. So but these were free coloreds who came in, and they were in 1837. These two men, free coloreds, who were now a part of the House of Assembly in the Virgin Islands. So we see a progression where the local persons, the indigenous now Virgin Islanders, were gradually gaining some acceptance and becoming politically minded.
And getting some of the reins of power.
Yes, but it's interesting that you should say that, because when we talk about the Virgin Islands as a colony, that system changed about 1854. 1854, the whole legislative system changed, and that was because of the 1853 riots. During the 1853 riots, the then president of the Virgin Islands wrote to the governor and recommended that the House of Assembly be disbanded. because remember now there were 3 colors in the House of Assembly at this time, and the number was growing.
And it was a House of Assembly.
Yes, it was
There
still a House of Assembly
that's-
until then.
and that was what's called. It wasn't
Yeah.
called
Originally.
Legislative Council.
No, it was
The
a House of Assembly, full
yes.
power.
Okay.
And they at this point in 1853, when they had the riots, the numbers were still high in terms of 3 colors. And after the riots, during the riots, one of the letters that the president of the Virgin Islands wrote to the governor was that we need to disband the House of Assembly. Because I think what Colonel Chad was seeing was that here were these people, former slaves, rising up against the establishment or the established order of the day. And these people were gaining political clout and power. And if they got control of the House of Assembly, it would have been a sad day. So they
For the British.
For the British, yes. And they figured that they have to disband it. So they disbanded the House of Assembly in the Virgin Islands in 1854. The House of Assembly voted, they disbanded themselves. So we then we were no longer in charge of ourselves in that sense, in terms of being able to pass laws with the House of Assembly.
Assist in making our own decisions.
Yeah, so it was gradually moving down, and then that went all the way down to about 1872, when everything just closed down, and the Virgin Islands became a part of the Federation of the Leeward Islands,
Okay.
the Leeward Islands colony.
And when we come back, we're going to take a break forward from our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk about when we became a territory.
Yeah.
Okay. Keep it locked right here in the Spotlight. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors.
Spotlight is brought to you by Tortola Concrete Limited and H. Lavity Stout Community College.
Welcome back to Spotlight. We're having a fantastic discussion here with Dr. Angel Smith. He's Director of Virgin Islands Studies Institute at H. Lavity Stout Community College, and we're also talking with Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Education and Culture, Youth Affairs and Sports, Mrs. Brenda Letsum-Tai, talking about Territory Day and the activities that's going to be coming up. We're going to go over that again before we go. But we left off talking about the historic political developments of the PVI in terms of the legislature, the House of Assembly, local, freed enslaved Africans becoming more powerful in the British formed and controlled House of Assembly. Territory Day. Territory has a political connotation.
Yeah.
It's not a landmass. As a territory, it's a political structure.
Yes. Yeah.
Begin from there.
As you said, we now celebrate Territory Day. Before we were a territory, we were a colony. As I started out talking about when we became a colony, as all the other colonies in the British Caribbean, being a part of what was then the British Empire, far-flung. And so a territory is like a remnant of the old empire. The old empire was disbanded. You then had the British Commonwealth, and nobody wanted to continue using the term colony. So it was changed to call it to territory. But that came a bit later on. That came a bit later on. But at the time we were just talking about in the 1854, when the House of Assembly was disbanded and a legislative council was instituted, then we see a sort of a downgrading. At that point, instead of being a formal colony on its own, the Virgin Islands became what would have been called a crown colony at that time. And what I should say is that what happened in the Virgin Islands in 1854 with the disbanding of the House of Assembly and creating a legislative council happened in all the other colonies simultaneously. Because the problems that started in the Virgin Islands, you had a domino effect across the British Caribbean. So the British then had great experience in solving this problem and disbanding the House of Assembly. They had practice in the Virgin Islands, the smallest territory. So when they had a similar problem
So
in Jamaica,
they took away the power.
yeah. When they had a similar problem in Jamaica, again, when the colored people were rising up and they were getting power, they then disbanded the House of Assembly, because if these colored men got this kind of power, it would have been trouble for the British, because they were not necessarily loyal to the British Crown. They were loyal to each other.
Yes.
And in the Caribbean context. So you see that is sort of a downgrading of the power. It means then that as a colony, the Virgin Islands was then ruled directly from England. And so the power base was not local. So we had that sort of a downgrading. And as I said, that came right down to about 1872, when in fact the Leeward Islands colony was created. So Antigua, St. Kitts, Nevis, Anguilla, Montserrat, and the BVI became a part of the Leeward Islands colony, with one governor who was then in Antigua, and then the Virgin Islands was referred to as a presidency. So we were no longer a colony. We were downgraded to the point where we were a presidency, and the British Virgin Islands was then just administered by an administrator. Somebody who reported back to the government.
And if you wanted to buy a freezer for the territory, we had to get permission.
Had to go back to
Antigua.
Yeah. So a lot of our senior citizens can tell you about the days of being under Antigua, because that's what they experienced, because that continued right up until the 1950s. You know, so that was something that we did not have any say politically for a long period of time. In fact, while the Leeward Islands colony was created, there was a General Legislative Council that met in Antigua. At some point, there was a representative from the Executive Council in the Virgin Islands who would represent the Virgin Islands in Antigua. J.W. Georges was one of those representatives at one point. In 1902, while they still had the semblance of a council in the Virgin Islands, that whole thing came to an end. And the whole structure of passing laws for the Virgin Islands was then disbanded, and that power was given to the General Legislative Council. So we were not passing any laws, doing anything in the Virgin Islands.
And that General Legislative Council was where?
That was based in Antigua. And that had members from all of the different presidencies in the colony. So we survived that, well, probably not very well, because at that point we were considered probably one of the poorest in the region. And that went on up until the 1950s, when we have the 1949 demonstrations, where those persons, Theodore Faulkner, Carlton Fax de Castro, and Gladys Fonseca, they came together and then started protesting, and had the Great March of 1949, calling for the reinstitution of a legislative council in the Virgin Islands.
You said something there, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. When you said that at that particular point we weren't faring well because we were perhaps one of the poorest of the colonies at that time. But during that time, were our forefathers not, providing though for themselves and their families in terms of farming and fishing, livestock breeding, and building, hewing out trees and making things making fish traps and
building
boats.
What
building boats. Right. So I just want you to interject that little piece about it, because forgive me, we don't talk about the genius, the ingenuity, and the creativity of our forefathers.
Yeah.
We present our history with facts and dates, but we don't talk about the spiritual aspect of our growth and development as a people, and from whence we came, and from the persons we came from, and their genius and creativity and ingenuity that we have adopted up to this very moment.
Well, I think when we talk about the state of being and living and the economy in the Virgin Islands was considered the poorest in that from a government perspective. I don't think the Treasury had much in it.
Right.
The people, however, on the other hand, they were probably rich because if the agricultural base was still very strong within the Virgin Islands. In fact, in 1900s, that was when the British started taking some interest in trying to revive the agricultural industry. But people were into farming and fishing. Boat building was still very strong because then there was a trade with the Danish islands, and then after they became American islands, again that trade continued. So the economy of the Virgin Islands, from the official perspective, was
Right.
not very strong. There was the unofficial economy. I dare say that smuggling was probably one of the biggest things because
'Cause-
people felt that they were being taxed too heavily for everything.
Because I would like to let you know, we might not have had shoes. We might not have had we might have had one set of clothes for school and one set of clothes for church and one pair of shoes. Some of us
Yeah.
ain't had no shoes at all. One pair of shoes for church and one for school. But we were not poor. You know what I'm saying? We had a ball. I remember growing up, and this is much later, obviously. But I suspect that coming through that process,
Yeah.
the children created their own games, created their own
Yeah.
toys, and you know, I could just envision the past from where I grew up. That we must have had a ball. I don't think none of us were hungry, none of us were starving.
But I think too, because remember, this was still a period the Virgin Islanders were still owning large tracts of land. People, you know, they were probably cash poor, but they had wealth, and the wealth was in the land because their livelihood was from the soil. To be able to plant and to look after animals, and you needed land for that. So the Virgin Islander was still closely attached to his land.
So let's get back to
You know?
the political process.
So
there.
the-
Well, I just
and
needed,
that's important.
I think
It's
that's important.
It's
to
important.
interject.
Put the balance in.
Yeah.
In 1949, we had the Great Demonstration. And the Great Demonstration came, the story is told because Theodore Faulkner was on Tortola, his wife was having a baby, and there was some difficulties, so he had to bring her to the hospital in town. And he decided to stick around. And as he stayed around, he heard people talking about the dissatisfaction with the then administrator, with Cruikshank. And as he talked, the more he heard, he started to figure, well, you know, he needs to have some public debate on it. So he would get up in the market and started to talk about all the things that people were telling him about Commissioner Cruikshank. And people started gathering and listening. So because he was very entertaining, I was told. Cruikshank was considered one of the finest administrators that came to the shores of the Virgin Islands, and it was said that he probably did more than most of the administrators before him. But one of our elders described him this way. They said that he was an Oxford graduate, but he had one problem. He could only divide by 2. Interestingly, because I said whatever money was in the government treasury, half was to run the country, the other half to run government house. Whatever water that was in the reservoir, half for Rotown, the other half for government house. Electricity supply, whatever was there to run the electrical supplies for the country, the hospital, well, only half for them and Rotown and half for government house. So this was some of the dissatisfaction. People felt that they were paying taxes.
And he
there
was taking
no,
too much.
no representation.
He was taking too much.
Exactly. They felt that it was no representation. So hence the demonstration. Look, we need our legislative council to pass laws, and so we know where our taxes are going and help to develop the country. After the 49 demonstration, then we had the institution of the restoration of a legislative council in 1950. Now, about this time, we had another major change in the region. And that is, remember I was saying that we were a part of the Leeward Islands colony. But now we had our legislative council. One of the members from our local legislative council would then represent the BVI on the General Legislative Council, and that was H.R. Penn at the time. And in 1954, there was the move to establish the West Indies Federation.
Yes.
And the Leeward Islands Legislative Council was being disbanded so that they could now make room to establish this West Indies Federation. And H.R. Penn and the others who were in support of it was on the view that the BVI would not become a part of the West Indies Federation. And they decided that they would stand out because, you see, they had just gotten a taste of their own political power.
Yes.
And they weren't prepared to
relinquish
They
that.
said, no, we ain't giving that up.
Yeah.
Because it means now you were a part of a small Leeward Islands colony, you'd had much say. But if you become a part of this big West Indies one,
You have even
no
less
say.
say.
Even less.
Exactly.
You have even less
So they voted to stay out of the Leeward Islands colony. So when the federation was started and the federation came into being, what happened was that the BVI then stood out of the West Indies Federation
And became a territory on
and
its own.
became
Became
a colony.
A colony.
And
Okay.
became a colony
A colony.
again.
Again.
So we were now a colony once again. So on the 1st of July, 1956, we then were given that status of being a colony in our own right once over, and that was celebrated with great fanfare in the BVI.
And that's that's territory.
That's
Day.
territory.
is
Day.
That's territory.
Yeah,
Day.
because then again, as I said, by the time everything started to come down now, and remember now the West Indies Federation eventually died at a natural death. The former colonies were now moving in towards independence. So the colony thing wasn't in good standing, so they just changed the name.
Change the name.
Yeah.
And say, well, they are now territory.
They're territory.
So hence we were celebrating first Colony Day, and then
Now we celebrate
Territory Day.
And of course, you have the United Nations conventions that's against colonization, and
Yeah.
so that is
Well, the whole decolonization process,
yes.
And then that brought us now to the whole British overseas territories, and the change in the relationship.
Yeah.
You know, I think by a different name.
Yeah. I think we had a different name. I think we had a different
same
name.
thing.
Yeah.
So that's where-
Start the illusion, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We gotta take another break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk a little bit more of the constitutional development from a territory, and then we're gonna bring Paul. I have Paul Hewlett here with us, so we're gonna talk about a national sport. Now we have several sports going on in territory, and I don't know which sport we're going to choose as a national sport. Being that we are still a colony,
We're territory now.
we still a colony by another name,
Different name, yes.
right? That we might be thinking about cricket as a national sport, but a lot of the kids like to play basketball, and a lot of kids are now beginning to play football, and we've always had softball. It's always been the big thing. I think softball has been a bigger thing in the BVI than cricket. Yeah. So we're gonna talk some about development of a national sport right after these words from our sponsors. When we come back, we're gonna continue with you, Dr. Smith, for a few more minutes, and then we're gonna bring in Paul on the ball, Paul Hewlett, and we're gonna talk about the development of a national sport. Keep it locked ahead of the Spotlight. A lot of more interesting discussions to come.
Spotlight is brought to you by the National Bank of the Virgin Islands, the BVI Tourist Board, and CCT Global Communications.